Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of the A Full Quota podcast. My name is Mpho and I've got Tim Del Lace here with me to take you through all things that have happened in South African cricket in the past week since we last met on Monday. South Africa was concluding a T20 series, and we were looking towards we actually didn't even look towards the ODI series. We're still talking T20s, but the ODI series is still very important. We're going to talk about that. And then on top of that, we're going to be talking about the CSA Div2 T20 Cup, where we have a surprising winner. But outside of that, before we do anything, please do subscribe to our One World Sports Radio channel. Please also follow us on Twitter at One World Sports Radio, at One World SR, on Facebook, at One World Sports Radio. Also, we're available on Instagram as well. We also have a Patreon account if you want to donate to us and help us keep this show the show on the road per se. Well, the wheels in turn to keep us going. But before we do anything, Tim, how you doing?
I'm doing good, mate. I'm doing good. Now we're really into the actual nitty gritty of the domestic season in particular. It's good to actually get down into that and give all those games and those fixtures and players some real exposure, because I've seen absolutely nothing in terms of what we saw over the weekend. I looked all over Twitter and the social media and thing, and apart from a few handles, there's been very little from that front.
Well, that's the disappointing part about this, and I think maybe before we just I think for me that's the one thing, and we'll talk about it later on. It hasn't been great, and I do hope CSA kind of realizes that that's where you need to grow the game. That's where you need to get people actually parting with their money to go and watch and everything else. And if you don't care about it, what do you expect people do? Like, how do you expect people to come and watch if you don't care about it? But anyway, do it later. But the most important thing about this one is the ODI series against India. I know we're preparing for a T20 World Cup. I get it, Tim. My only issue is that there's another World Cup, a bigger World Cup, a World Cup I think many people care about. I know they say ODI is dying, but the 50 over World Cup is something in South Africa, and a lot of South Africans actually want to win. But we found ourselves in this Mark Boucher regime where we've never been in the top 8 in the Super League for a while. And it's now become obviously football. You have to qualify. ICC is trying to make it every ODI relevant. But you're finding yourself in a situation, South Africa's finding themselves in a situation where every game is a must win. And you and I are going to be talking about it, but actually, let's put up the log. South Africa obviously having won the first ODI, they've lost the second ODI, and this is a series they actually needed to try and win full out and try necessarily whitewash India to give themselves a chance. And if they did, they would have put themselves a chance. But now, if you look at the table, I'll put up the table there, and you can look there. England is sitting at first at 125 points. Australia 120, Bangladesh 120 points in third, Pakistan in fourth with 120. The host nation, India, who technically already qualified, on 119 points in fifth, New Zealand on 110 points in sixth, Afghanistan on 100 points in seventh, West Indies are eighth with 88 points, and we're going to talk about them in a bit. Ireland ninth and 68, Sri Lanka 10th with 62 points, South Africa in 11th with 59 points, and that's after the win, the first ODI win. And then obviously Zimbabwe and Netherlands below them, who are the two associate nations that are allowed to do this. The whole premise here, Tim, is everyone plays the same level of games, and so there are some teams like Afghanistan who've got a lot of games to play. They still got to play Sri Lanka, they still have to go and play Pakistan, they still have to play India as well. So they are effectively a team that we can't catch as South Africa. We can, but you got to hope that they lose every single game they go on from now on. But West Indies is the team with about 88 points. We're sitting on 59 points, 10 points for a win. And you pray to God you don't get any overrate restrictions because you lose a point for overrate. So that means South Africa need to win. That is 1, 2, 3 games to cross the West Indies bar. Because they're on 88, we're on 59. So win 3 games gets you to 89.
Just above the West Indies. Yeah.
Yes, just above the West Indies, right? And West Indies have now played all their games in the Super League. So that's where we need to do. So we've got South Africa now have five. What is it? It's the India game. There's 6 games left, and they need to win
Six games. Yeah.
6 games left, and they need to win 3 of the next 6. Which is why the series is so important, because well, 4 to kind of get you in comfortably. Because if you have any overrate issues like the West Indies have, you could have points deducted. So effectively, you need to win 4 of the next 6, right? And we've got 1 game against India, which is coming up. We've got 1 game, and we've got 3 games against England, and you've also got 2 games against the Netherlands. How comfortable are you, Tim, that South Africa will make it in?
If they had won yesterday, which I genuinely think they should have, I think at the 40 over mark when they were batting, I think that it should have been not over, but we should have been very confident that we could defend 300 plus, which is what we should have been getting. However, because we've lost, it now becomes very difficult. It becomes very difficult because, okay, you know you're going to beat, well, you don't know, but by and large, you're going to beat the Netherlands. So that's 2 games. That's 2 games over. My feeling is, this side at the moment are a little bit, they're a little bit short of something. They are giving it their all, but they're a little bit short of something. I think they're going to lose on Tuesday. I think the wheels of luck and fortune have gone in India's favour. They found a way to play with this slightly weakened side. So I think that they're going to win on Tuesday. They're going to win the series. Again, the series doesn't matter. And it's going to come down to those 3 games against England. And I think the way we're playing England at the moment, home or away, you have to say England are favourites. And strong favourites. So not at all confident at all. We're going to have to play exceptionally well. And I think we're missing something. And again, we've spoken about it before. It's those death overs. We've talked about the death overs in the T20s. It's the same problem in the ODIs. They don't seem to have 2 guys that are nailed on in that format, and that is a huge problem. We've got lots of options, but we don't quite seem to have the right guys doing the business when it comes to that. Batsmen are coming into form, but it's actually the bowling in those death overs that is costing us games.
Tim, I wouldn't necessarily say it was the bowling. To a certain extent, yes, they haven't bowled well, but to put up 279 in the year of our Lord 2022 in an ODI match where the pitch is playing really okay-ish for batting is not something we can say, yeah, no, the batters have done okay. I looked at I expected at least a score of above minimum 300 or at least minimum above 280, but with their bowlers having a great day. But if your bowlers are not going to have a great day, you need to put up scores of about 300. And this has been South Africa's problem for the past however many years. I think since the last World Cup, the 2019 World Cup. At the 2019 World Cup, we're shown that you need to consistently score 300. I don't believe we have a batting lineup that can score 300. I think our strike rates are a little bit low for a batting lineup, and I don't think the type of strategy that Mark Boucher imposes gets us to 300. And to me, when I look at yesterday's game, I get the bowling was great, but then I look at India and I'm like, actually, 320 was the pass score here. We were way off. And to a certain extent, 300 adds that whole psychological barrier to India if you get 300 as to how they were going to do it. And so for me, I sit here going, actually, there's something slightly off with the batting in terms of giving us and helping us get to totals over and above the bowling. Yes, I understand the death bowling isn't great, but we never even got to the death overs. You know, the game was done within 5 overs, with 5 overs to spare. And India were batting really well. And I think there was a point where South Africa and India were at the same level, around about 30 overs-ish. And then India just kept on increased the run rate to get to where they needed to get to, where South Africa just kept on going along and thinking, because this idea of getting to over 40 and only exploding at over 40 needs to stop. You actually need to start accelerating the run rate from over 35 if you've got wickets in hand, and we did have wickets in hand at that point in time. Yes, we did lose a few wickets in the middle there after that that Aiden and Reza the partnership. But to a certain extent, for me, that is where I think we lost the game. We lost the game there rather than actually from a bowling perspective. And to a certain extent, that was a 320 pitch. The bowlers were going to struggle. It's just that I know Mohammad Siraj bowled really well yesterday, but to me, I looked at that and I was like, we didn't do much with what we had, with the resources that we had, and we were found wanting. What do you say to that?
I'll come back a little bit because I'll disagree with it a little bit. I get what you mean, but we were 221 for 4 after 38 overs. Now, that is still within the framework of have wickets in hand and go big. I agree in that context. That's not the way you want to play one-day cricket in 2022. But the point is we had Miller and we had Markram. Markram was on 75. 38 overs, 221 for 4. If you're looking at that stage, you're looking at 300 plus. You're looking at 100 runs of those 12 overs. 85 to 100. You're looking at 300, 310, around about the job done. The problem was, India's bowling in those 12 overs was absolutely outstanding. I didn't think they bowled particularly well up until that point. I really did not think they bowled particularly well. What they then decided, and they saw the pitch, they said, this is a difficult pitch to get runs when you have to come in, when you have to start. It's fantastic once you're settled, which India showed that when they got in. But when they got those wickets, they then slowed up the run rate completely by bowling slower balls and cutters. They didn't bowl them in the middle of the wicket either. They bowled them good length deliveries. So it was very difficult for the South African batsmen to get underneath them. And there was a variety of them. There were off cutters, leg cutters, knuckle ball, slower balls. And South Africa did not have a plan for that. They didn't move outside their crease. They didn't move outside the ball to try and hit over extra cover. They didn't countenance India's bowling. They just said, well, we'll hit it out of the park. And when they tried to do that, because of the lowness of the pace of the delivery, they got out. So I agree to on the game plan, but at the moment you've got Risa Hendricks massively in form. Markram played really, really well. Klaasen is in really good form as well. I thought he played really well, and then he threw it away. But he looked really good. So you got 3 guys there who I think looked on the top of their games. And that's all you need. And then you had David Miller coming in later on in the innings. Normally he would be making...
But nah.
50...
Tim.
I know you're going to come back and say, but Markham's average is 28. I know that.
I'm not doing that. I wasn't doing that.
But his innings yesterday was superb.
My only issue is that we can't say the bowling was bad when you were 220 for 4 after 38 overs and you ended up at 278. That's inexcusable. To me, that's
I'm saying the bowling was excellent.
Wow. Yeah, no, but even then, that's inexcusable. That truly is inexcusable. Like, you can't be at 228 and the next 12 overs you only score 60 runs. That's 5 runs and over. In the final power play, I'd rather you be bowled out. And this is where I'm sitting, right? I'd rather you be bowled out for 278 and you were 220 for 4. That's when you'll say India's bowled well. But you've got wickets in hand. Yes, they're not the prettiest of wickets, but they're not the guys you can rely on. But to me, I sit there going, that largely is where our problem lies. And then on top of that, I don't think anybody could have thought that was par. But obviously it's a ground we haven't played on, so everyone's going to assume that you're there and thereabouts, and you're only going to find out when India bat what it was. And yes, our bowling has failings, but I don't think it's that bad that we need to be saying, no, the bowler's the bad. Yes, I get Reese's in form, I get Aiden's form, and it was amazing. But the problem with this team, and the problem with the many people, for instance, why many people wanted Rassie out of the T20 side was that he bats too slowly. He gets runs, but he bats too slowly. right? Is that not the case here in South Africa? That we did well, but we batted too slowly and we didn't take that advantage. And so that's where I'm sitting. I'm happy Markham's gotten runs. I'm happy Reeves has gotten runs. I'm happy Heinrich's gotten runs, but it wasn't enough. And we can't sit here and say it was the bowling when the fundamental point is that we never actually got a pass score in the first place. And that's where my question is. My point is that our pass score was too low. It wasn't. Our bowling was bad too. I get it, but our pass score was too low. And you're not going to beat England like this.
No, I agree with that. I do agree. I do blame slightly more with the bowlers, and I'm sure we'll get into it. For me, that there are reasons for that, and not entirely of their own volition. There are guys there that have been playing a lot of cricket recently, and I get that we have a World Cup to qualify for, and that is crucial. But which World Cup do we have a better chance of winning? The 50 over or the T20? The T20. With that in mind, easy in hindsight, and I didn't say this before, I wish I had, but I didn't. With that in mind, it might have been an idea to rest somebody like Rabada, to rest somebody like Nokia, and go in with two fresh guys who are raring to go, willing to prove a point, and really make a name for themselves. Lazard Williams, Parnell, and somebody else. I'm just plucking names out of a hat at the moment. But I do wonder about that. Remember when we had the fiasco of the last World Cup? That all the guys who wanted to go to the IPL, they finished the IPL, and they were visibly tired. They were visibly tired leading in that T20 that 50 over World Cup in England, and that definitely played a part in our demise and our poor showing. So I do wonder, as crucial as Tuesday is, I would actually rest Rabada. I would say, you know what, you're not quite where we want you to be. Our focus is T20 World Cup. I suspect he won't play, but it did worry me. He looked short of his usual brilliance, and not that he was poor, but he wasn't his best. And we need him at his best if we want to win important games.
Well, if we want to go to the World Cup, we need Kagiso to be at his best as well, especially on Tuesday. There's no place for me to say Tuesday is a must win, and then we're like, well, we need to rest Kagiso, right? If I'm going to win the game, Kagiso is the one guy I need to win. So we're stuck in a rock and a hard place unless you want to win 2 games against England and you think you can with a B team that's not playing in the SA20. So for me, that's the catch-22 that Mark Barch is in. And to a certain extent, we don't even know who the new coach is going to be after him. So not really sure how the new coach, whomever that may be, is going to take kindly to Mark Barcher leaving him a lemon in the ODI side. And to a certain extent, if we do not qualify, that new coach is going to take all the bad news on him. But that's just me. What other changes would you make in the team there, Tim, coming in for Tuesday?
I wouldn't change the batting. I wouldn't change the batting at all. I would just try to get them to understand that when the opposition changes their tactic, change yours as well. That is the one big criticism that we could definitely lay at the batters. I think they did all right. They did quite well. But when India changed, they didn't change with it. They stuck with we're going to hit straight, hit them out of the ground, and then you do that, you get slow balls, and good slow balls, it just goes straight up in the air and gets caught. So that would be my thing. When you get set, when you get to those positions, when you get to the 220 for 4, and you've got 15 overs, 16 overs to go, it needs to be something different. It needs to be Tristan Stubbs come in and take the attack. I don't think I would change that. Maharaj was poor. There's no getting around it. Maharaj was poor.
But
I
he's the
might,
captain.
I might change Maharaj. Yeah, again, it goes round where we are with the performer situation. It really does. Do you drop the guy who's your captain, who's just had a really poor game? Now, I'm not putting it all on him, but there was a period in the game where they did create pressure. They weren't getting wickets, South Africa, but they did create a pressure. They did get the run rate required for India close to sevens. Close to 7.5, round about there. And then they had the two spinners on. And they didn't create the pressure. They took the pressure right off. I think in the 3 overs that Maharaj bowled, he bowled 4 long hops. And I think 3 of them went into the crowd. You know, I know what he was trying to do.
Yeah.
He bowled 3 short balls in 3 overs. And I mean, very short. And everybody bowls bad balls. But they all went for 6. And his overs went for plenty in the end. So that does, you know, it's a one-off game. So you could say, Miller, you're the captain. I'm going to play somebody else. You know, I'm not sure who I would play.
Shamsi wasn't feeling well yesterday.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so that's my thing. My thing is I look at this bowling lineup, and I look at it, I'm like, wait. There was a stat I think we did, and this is bad podcasting, so I do apologize for everybody watching and listening, because I should have had the stat ready. But Tim brings out these little nuances that you want to explore, and I don't want to explore while we're on the podcast. But remember, there was a time around the 2019 World Cup and slightly after, just before COVID, where we're talking about middle overs wicket takers. And there were 3 guys who were taking wickets for South Africa in the middle overs quite a lot. For a lot. And you had this little triumvirate, and they would always bowl together, and Faf liked using them in this little spot. One of them was Andile Petluwa. I know his batting speaks from out the side, I get it. And you guys will say you used to love Andile and everything else. But Andile is a really good bowler in the middle overs and in ODI cricket. He was the leading wicket taker in that period. And to a certain extent, I think that's where South Africa is missing. The other guy is Lunginditi in the middle overs. He was really good in the middle overs. Not as prolific as Andile, but he was number 3 in taking wickets in the middle overs. But we'll check it out. You can check it out and bring it to us, and then we can talk about it if you want. But that's something I'm going to look at and try and see. And the last one is to Tabraiz Shamsi. Shamsi was a wicket taker in those middle overs, number 2 for South Africa after Lunginditi. None of those guys are there. None of those guys were in that team yesterday. And to a certain extent, that's where we lost the game. We weren't able to take wickets regularly in the middle overs. And to a certain extent, with Andile's drop in form on the bat and his movement out of the side, you've kind of lost that. And obviously, Tabraiz Shamsi's off form as well. The only other guy you could have relied on isn't playing, because obviously we're doing a rotation and everything else. So to a certain extent, I look at that and I was like, yeah. And of those guys you're speaking about, they're the guys who come with the variations. You're talking knuckleballs, you're talking slower balls, you're talking cutters. That's Andile and things. And I'm not asking for Andile to come to the side. I'm just putting a point out there to say that's essentially what was missing. You're telling me, Tim, that we're missing all of those balls? The best proponents of that in South Africa are those 3. And to a certain extent, a guy like Lazard could have done it, but Lazard was busy hiking with the Titans for like, God knows, 10 hours in some ravine here in South Africa. But we're missing things like that. And to a certain extent, I think that's always been a problem with our cricket, batting and bowling, especially in the ODI format, is the nuances of South African of playing cricket. You know,
I thought Parnell would be the guy, or one of the guys, that would bring that. I genuinely, when he came back into the fold, I wasn't convinced on him in 50-over cricket. I'm sold on the T20 stuff. But I genuinely, if he was going to come back in the one ODI side, I thought he would be that guy that would have those nuances, those differences, those cutters, those slower balls. I saw none of it yesterday. I saw none of it. Again, I thought he bowled reasonably well. I thought he kept things reasonably tight. But I didn't see somebody thinking outside the box. For somebody who's so experienced playing cricket all around the world, that was a disappointment for me. I certainly. So I would say, along with the guys that you've mentioned, I would think he would be that guy who bowl in that period and to do those things.
Is there so looking forward? I think for me, obviously Timber's ill, and so now I'm assuming he's going to be fine for tomorrow. The way they spoke about it was like a mild infection. I'm like, but infections take like a week to get through, because you're going to get antibiotics, and infections imply something viral, right? Not COVID, something viral like a flu or something like that. Not a cold, because a cold's not a virus, flu's a virus. So I was like, okay, this is weird, but I'm assuming it's the same thing Tabrez has. So I'm counting them out. But if they were there, I'd try have them in.
It's why Stubbs is in the squad. Where I sort of thought, well, again, that's a risk. You know, I'm not sure, particularly if you want him to bowl. I'm not trusting him to bowl 10 overs. You know, 2 or 3 max.
Tristan Comp. Tristan has to be the Aiden Markram type of role where he takes a few overs, and there is an argument where you can split out 20 overs amongst 4 guys who actually can bat, and hope that 2 of them don't get hit out the park, and then it can go and bowl like 7 and the others bowl 3, something like that, like India, right? That Shabazz Ahmed, they had Washington Sundar. They went through a whole host of guys. Obviously, that Shardul Thakur, who can bat 2 and can take a lot. He only bowled 5. They had obviously Avesh Khan's is an outside pace. They had 3 guys, right? And between the 3 guys, they shed 25 overs, right? So to a certain extent, South Africa's trying to do that, but South Africa's got 5 bowlers plus Aiden, right? Instead of 4 bowlers plus Aiden and someone else. And I've wanted South Africa to go to that 4 bowlers plus Aiden and someone else, but we're not there yet, you know. And so to a certain extent, you know, and ideally I'd want you to go 3 bowlers plus 3 others who share the other 20 and possibly can even take up to 30 if. And I kind of felt we missed the trick because I was like, wait, how many spinners do we have? Okay, we got 2 plus Aiden. Okay, that's fine. Felt a lot of samey to me, but we don't have wrist spinners. And so the only change I'd make, and I'm with you, maybe Timber does need a break. But I know Mark's not gonna. If Timber's fit, Mark's not gonna die without Timber. That's what he's pretty much shown the world. So yeah, but outside of that, I'd probably bring Ngidi back in and rest Kagiso, and see what it looks like with him in there. Dwayne obviously getting injured is a problem, but I'd also actually even take Anrich and Kagiso out and bring in Marco and Ngidi in. Strength lengthens the batting, gives you something else, some pub hitting on the back end as well with Marco. So I do that, especially Andile's in the squad too, but I know he's not going to play. And so, but that's another option as well. You'd want to bring him in. The other question I wanted to ask, obviously, last week we found out that Dwayne Pretorius is injured and he's going to be out of the World Cup. Who are you bringing in? Because it feels like it's between 2 people, Andile and Marco. Who are you bringing into this thing? Do you want because I kind of feel like obviously you want the batting, you go with Marco. If you want the bowling, you go with Andile. But it's T20. Has Marco done enough in T20 for us to give him that, or are we just working off of Test match cricket?
We're working off his ceiling. Marco has the potential to be a 3-format player. And I have no doubt in my mind that he will be a 3-format player in 12 months. I have no doubt in my mind whatsoever. It probably, ideally, you would want Pretorius. You'd want that experience in there, even if his numbers recently have not been quite good enough in either format, in either batting or bowling. I'm still leaning towards Marco. Again, it's that difference factor and that ability with the bat. Now, again, Petnakwai has got that ability, but he hasn't quite nailed it down in terms of the batting. I'm going with the 6'8", can bowl short, bowl bounces, bowl cutters, hits the ball a long way. I'm going with that guy. That sort of X-Factor sort of player. I know that Petnakwai quite, when he first came onto the side, he was the X factor. I'm not sure he is anymore. Yeah, but he was. He was that X factor. He did add, he offers something different. I'm not sure that he has that. He's not quite where he should be, where he wants to be in his cricket at the moment. So I'm going with Mpho. I'm not sure which way they're going to go, but I'm certainly going with Mpho.
Yeah, okay. Well, both of them are reserves. So we'll find out soon enough who will be coming into the squad. Tim, let's move over to the CSA T20 this weekend, the Division 2 T20, where a surprise winner won, Tim. You must be happy about this. With the SA Under-19s coming out victorious. I thought this weekend we'd actually see SA Under-19 kind of struggle against the best teams in Division 2, the teams who are looking to be promoted. Yes, they did beat the Tuskers, which is fine. We would say that. And we're like, okay, cool, because the Tuskers are like number 2 in this thing. And then I was like, okay, against the Linyati, they've got some strong guys, Malcolm Murray and all those guys who could cause problems for them. And in that semi-final against the Linyati, they chased down 160 really well, managing to get there. And it wasn't like a perfect performance, but everybody chipped in with the bats. So Letswani got runs, Matthew Boast got runs, and obviously Ronan Harman, who played in the ODI final for the Lions and showed us glimpses of what he had, came through as well. Obviously, from a bowling perspective, Matthew Boast came through. Liam Aldo, you said, offline, that he was obviously the number 1 wicket taker coming through. And then in the final against the Northern Cape, they beat the best team in Division 2. What does this say about this team? Do we have a crop of youngsters who are beating guys older than them? Can they go on to win a World Cup? And do we have a Rabada, Aiden Markram-esque group, Petluwayo and Giti-esque age group coming through like we did, I don't know, I think it was 8-10 years ago. I don't know. When did they win that World Cup? 2014. So it's like
2014.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to go to the press release after the S19
that's
guys
where we get information about these games. Like, if you didn't watch them on YouTube, you have to wait for the CSA press release that actually goes to journos. So we got it, but like, if you're just a person and you didn't know that this thing was happening, yeah, SA Under-19 beat grown men. You know, when you're 19, you're playing against grown men and you're beating grown men. That's actually what happened, but like, you need to find it in some niche places, which says to me that CSA, if you don't care about something, then we know you don't care about it, but then you can't then come back and say people aren't watching cricket when, even if it was the lowest form of your cricket, you're not even trying to get it out there and advertise and try to get people to go and watch and do everything else. So we know what you care about because you've seen it. That's SA20. And
that's fine. But
hopefully some of the Division 1 matches, because even last year, the 50 over the One Day Cup, like only those who were in the know knew, you know, but outside of that, the One Day Cup final at Centurion was played might as well have been played behind closed doors because clearly nobody was there. And so there's something there about what you value, your customers will value. And currently right now, you're not valuing much apart from that tournament in January.
Yeah, but it is a shame. It is a great shame. I'm doing some work later on in the season on this domestic cricket, and I told the people, I said to them, the problem that I have is getting the 11s before a ball is bowled. And they know. They know. I know, and they know. And this is for Division 1 as well as Division 2. Now, I know there's a connection problem for some teams, but some teams, they live in the metropolis of the country. They live in big cities. They really should not be saying things like that. It should be a whole lot better. It should be a whole lot better. You only need to watch the SA20 Twitter handle and see the exposure and the amount of work that they do on the players that are selected for that competition. If they can do it, then so can we. But I'm going off script here. Just on this competition. So, fantastic u19 win. The CSA Pathways man, Edward Causer, said this after the win. On behalf of Cricket South Africa, I extend our congratulations to the SA Under-19 management and players for their efforts. The brand of cricket they displayed throughout the campaign is encouraging and forms part of the long-term ambition as a pathway structure. That right there. The brand of cricket they displayed. The brand of cricket that the U19 guys displayed was foreign to every other side in this competition. Every other side. They played attacking cricket from ball one. They took the attack to opposition. They had Matthew Boast, who was everybody would agree is a bowling all-rounder. They have him come in at number 3 on several matches and take the attack, because they'd lose a losing wicket and he would go in, and his job was to be the pinch hitter. It didn't matter what the score was, whether it was 7 for 1 or 5 for 2 or what it was. You go out there and you hit the ball out the park. And he delivered. He finished the tournament with a strike rate of 180. It was 211 after the group stages. He delivered on that thing. McKeel Prince, opening the batting, took the attack to the batsmen, to the bowlers. Every batsman that went out there delivered on that mantra of attacking the opposition. It didn't matter that the guy that they were facing has played domestic cricket for the last 5, 6, 7 years. That was irrelevant to them. They went out there and they said, we are going to show what is capable if you play an attacking way. That is what the way Cricket South Africa needs to play. All of the sides need to look at that and go, that is how you play attacking cricket. It isn't always going to work out. In the final, second top score for the other 19 side was 18, but their captain made 75 of 48 deliveries, because he said it didn't matter that they were losing wickets at the start. They were going to live by the sword of attacking cricket. It is so refreshing to see a team like that playing. Somebody tweeted to me after the group stage, why isn't SA Under-19 in one of the Division 1s, in the Division 1 competitions? On this performance, they definitely could do that. There are 4 players within that side. They could play in division sides.
Some of them already are playing Division 1.
Yes, but I mean, literally, first teamers and play that. I'm glad that I don't want it to be that way, because what it does is it's showing up the quality of the cricket that is being played, and the style. That is why it's so important to see that. So
But
the opening batsman, just quickly, opening batsman,
Okay.
Kwena Mpaka is 16 years old. 16 years old. His economy for the tournament was 7. His ability to bowl bounces, Yorkers, slower balls, you name it. His ability to bowl, he bowled at the start of the innings, he bowled at the middle of the innings, he bowled at the death overs. In all ranges of the game. This is for a 16-year-old. I cannot speak highly enough of this performance. Lastly, before I let you in, last year, this side Okay, not the exact same 11, but this side lost all of their matches.
Yes.
They lost all of their matches. They go from losing all of their matches to winning them all. They were
And this was
unbeaten.
a team that had Diego Brevis in, who wasn't there this time.
Yeah. And I cannot speak highly enough of this side.
Yeah, so I think for me, you speak of Gwena Mapaka, and I'm sitting there going, this kid didn't play at that World Cup. He played a few games at the World Cup. He didn't play a lot because he was a kid. He was 15 at the time. Now he's 16. And he is probably head and shoulders amongst all of them the best fast bowling find, probably even since Kagiso. I get Anuch, but Anuch's older than Kagiso, everybody. Let that Anuch's 28, Kagiso's still 27. Let that sink in. Right? And 5 years, he comes from Saints. I get it from Cincinnati. I get it here in South Africa, in Johannesburg. That kid, Gwena Mapaka, is insanely talented. Insanely talented. And you listen to Mark Zuckerman, you listen to Grant Lawson. There's a massive pipeline happening here in the north of all these kids coming out. And Gwena is one of them. Richard Selatswana is also very young. He's 16 as well. I think slightly older than Gwena, 17. And he didn't make SA under 19 last year. But obviously with batters, you got to give them time. With always fast bowlers, what you see is what you get. And he bowled with a lot of intelligence, bowled with a lot of pace. He's one of those guys who's willing to learn. And there's an improvement from the Gwena of last year to this Gwena that we saw these past 2 weeks. And that kind of tells you the type of play he is. And well done to Shukri Conrad because that team is just humming it all. For instance, right, last year, a lot of the guys played. Matthew Bose played last year. George Van Heerden played last year. But they look completely different cricketers. Completely different cricketers. Like Matthew Bose is probably going to be having these teams fight for him in the SA20 for a wild card spot. Right? It's like if you guys think about Tristan Stubbs, like Matthew Bose is like the next guy. Like that's the type of guy he is.
The left-handed version.
Yes. And then bowlers like Liam Elder. If you're asking where your spinners are coming from, Liam is one of those, and he can bat too. And so you got this thing, Liam Owaku, right? Slightly older than Gwena Mapaka, still a very good prospect, left arm seamer from the Western Cape. I watched him play last year live, and I was like, this kid is ready. He played Division 1 last year for some of the games because Western Province had situations.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He's also, like, to me, I see in 5 years' time, Kagiso, Gwena, and Liema. It's possible. Or Kagiso, Gwena, Marco, and Liema, or even Ngidi if the injuries are helping out. But to me, I look at some of the guys who are just below the 4 best bowlers, and I'm like, actually, you can add these kids in, give them a couple of years in a high-performance environment, and they could be good. The only worry I have is these kids losing out, South Africa losing out to these kids, losing these kids to a T20 type of situation where the money comes in. SA20 guys are millionaires. Next year, these kids will be millionaires. When we do the auction again next year, these kids are going to be millionaires. And the question is...
Yeah. That's unfortunately just the nature. Yeah.
It is, but that's been my worry about this. About SA20 is that these kids are really good across all 3 formats, and we can build them into 3 format players. But you need to have them invested into the system and not run at the side of money. But hopefully they won't. But there's an opportunity where kids are like, actually, I don't want to play Test match cricket. I'll play ODI cricket if we get to go to the World Cup. Outside of that, I'm just T20ing it. And if you can make that happen for me, that's it. And we're living in a generation where you're going to get people who are going to say that. You're living in a generation where guys who grew up watching the Proteas stink up the joint in Test match cricket. This is a generation where they were too young to see Jacques Kallis in his prime and too young to know a version of Jacques Kallis that was so good. To them in this situation, and also even a Hashim Amla, this is a generation that grows with A.B. de Villiers. It's not a generation, and it's not the generation that knows AB de Villiers as the young upstart cricketer. This is the generation that sees AB de Villiers dominating all three formats of the game. AB de Villiers striking and high averages and everything else. So this is the later end AB de Villiers, the Faf du Plessis. This is a generation that will not know a world where Graham Smith is starting out and dominating in England. This is a generation that knows Graham Smith's at the back end of his career. So we find ourselves in this little weird place with these kids where, unless if you're a cricket scholar and you love the game, you'll want to play the formats. But to a certain extent, this is a generation that grew up, maybe they did see South Africa play, because they're 18, right? So if you take 18 from 22, that brings you to about 2006. No. 2004, that's 2006 when they were born. Four when they were born. So when South Africa was world number one in 2012, they were 8. So depending on where people's cricketing growth is, it's a generation that may have missed South Africa going to England and conquering the world, but it's a generation that knows 2015 well, that knows what happened in 2019, that knows how a test team has done since then, And so, well, they know Sandpapergate, so they hate Australia. We know that. But we don't know where. But I was really happy with them. Any other players that you think people should watch out for? Everyone knows I love Richard Siletswani and still put his name up there. In that semi-final, he did really well. Obviously, we've spoken about Matthew Bosch, we've spoken about Kwena Mapaka, we've spoken Liam Mawaku, we've spoken Mikael Prince. Any other players we need to watch out for? Any other players that you want to see playing in Division 1 that you're like, ooh, this kid's interesting?
It took him a while. He failed. It failed at the start of the tournament. Got into situations where things were difficult, and he was playing that positive approach that I was talking about, but it wasn't working. He was making single figures. Juan James, he was coming in sort of number 5. Juan James, again from my area, he's certainly one to watch out for. It's still a little bit early for him, but he's doing the business at the next level. I do think a bit more exposure of this sort of cricket, and he'll certainly be there. Just to point out, 2 years ago, we would not be having this discussion. If we would be doing this conversation 2 years ago, we would not be talking about SA Under-19 guys playing against professional cricketers. Because of the structural change, they would have been playing semi-professional Colts cricket,
and it would be
friendly. Exactly, be friendly matches. We wouldn't be able to have any comment on them because we wouldn't have seen them. I can't tell you how important it is that these guys now, they've been seen. They've been seen by lots and lots of people. On the final, at a point of the final, yes, largely Asian, but that's not the point. 1,700 people was viewing the final at one point or another. The point is, it's there, it's visible. Click of a button, you can see the next best players that South Africa has to offer. The talent is definitely there. If you base it on the players that played for SA 19 in this tournament, the talent is definitely there. We often talk about the problems between the school and then the provincial. There's a disconnect. This is trying to stop that disconnect. These guys, 16, 17, 18, they are good enough for the next level. They're definitely good enough. It's now about making sure, as you point out, that they have a career in cricket. If they want a career in cricket, this is where you go. You go to SA 19s, you go to Division 1, and you go there, go to Proteas. There is now a very clear avenue for them.
Yeah. Look, I think let's leave it there. I think they've done really well, and it's surprising. And obviously, people don't like. So next year, if they don't win their games, don't be like, oh well. It happens in cycles, happens in generations. Sometimes you find guys who can actually compete. But Kwena Mapaka will be back here next year for SM19. Richard will be back because they're very young. There's many other youngsters there who will be back. But Ronan Harriman is probably going to open the batting for the Lions with Cameron Delport. And Reeza's probably going to be their number two. If Reeza's not a CSA, is not a T20 mercenary by then. So a lot of the guys are going to be in your domestic side. So go look out for them, go support them. It's not only about Devil Brims. There's so many other kids right now who are putting up their hands and saying, yes, this is me. This is what I can offer to the cricketing world in South Africa. So that's the exciting thing. Outside of that, that brings us to the end of our show. Good luck to the Proteas tomorrow for their match against India. It is a must win. Effectively, it's this, right? You need to win 4 games. If the Netherlands doesn't come at a time where it doesn't rain, we can count those 2 matches. But you never know what could happen because in South Africa, anything is possible. So we're counting those 2 Netherlands games. So that means you need to win 1 here and 1 versus England. If you lose tomorrow, you need to win 2 in England and 2 against the Netherlands. So yeah, and England are coming to South Africa, by the way, because that one was the one where they went and played golf and they got COVID and they didn't end up finishing. So it might have been a blessing in disguise that they actually did get COVID, but we'll find out because maybe we could have beaten them then because we got whitewashed in the T20s then. Outside of that, have a great day, everybody. Remember, follow us on all the different platforms. And Tim's got one last thing to say.
One last thing. So I've got news. I'm hoping it doesn't play a part, but it's rained at the venue for Tuesday for the last 3 days. It's been absolutely drenched. So hopefully we don't have a truncated game, which I think would play into India's favour. But there's been a lot of rain around.
Well, the last truncated game we won, but it's Delhi, right? It's the third ODIs in Delhi.
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, look. Just try to score 300 Proteas. Let's start there. Score 300 and then we'll figure out the rest. Outside of that, good luck to them and yeah, wish them all the best. Like right now, this is Mark's last ODI. I'm sitting there going, you know what, dude, just go. We'll fix whatever is left. If we need to go into a qualifier, we'll take the SA Under-19s with us because they seem to be playing attacking cricket. Outside of that, goodbye, good night, and le sale cagajizo.